Welcome to another round of Boardroom or Miro Board. Today we talk retrospectives with Agile coach Maria. Let's go. First question. You've spent 2 hours in a team retro, but the only input you've heard is Dave's. Boardroom or Miro Board?
Boardroom. In Miro, Dave can't hog the space because everyone can add thoughts anonymously, online at the same time.
Correct. Next. You need the team to act on feedback fast, so you turn all those retro notes into Jira tasks instantly.
Miro all the way. And I can assign those tasks to teammates.
You're nailing this. Now, you see hundreds of sticky notes from the retro. A real mess. But you organize them into 5 themes in just seconds.
Miro, I basically get back an entire hour when I use its AI tools for clustering.
And she's done it.
Join over 60 million people running actually enjoyable and actionable retros in Miro. Get your first 3 boards free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.
This is Donald Parham. You're listening to Chargers Unleashed, part of the LAFB Network. Stay jiggy.
Hey, this is Chris Open second. Chargers outside linebacker. Make sure you check out Chargers Unleashed.
Guys, Chargers Unleashed. Sebastian Joseph Day. You know the vibes. We outside.
You checking in with Mike Williams from the LA Chargers, and you're tuning into Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by BetOnline, Charger Bolt Family, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning in to the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, we made it. Night 1 of the NFL Draft officially in the books. If my voice sounds a little bit hoarse today, it is for a very, very good reason, as the draft party shenanigans that we had last night were festivus. They were filled with humor, hilarity, some shock, some interesting discussions, to say the least, after night 1. But many food and libations were consumed, and that was probably the best part. Just having a broad contingent of NFL fan bases represented was a great time last night. Great to have the guys from LAFB come down yesterday to celebrate as well. It was a good day 1. It was a good day 1, and I'm happy that I am not feeling as bad as I probably expected to feel this morning. and I mean that not in terms of what the Chargers did. I'm just talking about physically how I feel right now.
Yes. Great day for Chargers fans, Jake. They get their guy, rocking the number 1 Quentin Johnston. Late breaking news, we'll be wearing number 1 for the Los Angeles Chargers. Wide receiver at a TCU picked at number 21. Chargers get their offensive weapon. Not before there are some crazy shenanigans happening throughout the entirety of day 1. We'll talk about that, talk about Quentin Johnston as well, and then follow that up at the end with what we see as best fits and strategy and what it means for day 2, i.e. today. Jake, before we get into it, over or under? Let's go today. Over or under 0.5 offensive players selected in day 2.
You would think that the Chargers have to come out of day 2 with a tight end after what transpired yesterday and the expected run on tight ends that is probably going to take place today. So I would have to say over on that one.
Interesting.
But don't be surprised if it doesn't happen.
Yes.
Don't be surprised in classic Tom Telesco fashion. When you think that he's going to zig, he's going to give you a big fat zag across your face. So don't be surprised if that does happen. But in light of all that, I want to remind everybody that BetOnline remains your number 1 source for all of your football betting needs this season. You'll always find the latest odds, player news, and game trends and matchup info at BetOnline. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events. Head on over to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Just make sure you use that promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So, Jake, we got to see the Chargers pick a wide receiver in round 1. They go out and get Quentin Johnston out of TCU, a man with yak numbers oozing out of his stat book. 4 missed tackles, essentially breaking the charts for this wide receiver class in both of those metrics. Speed, yards after the catch, closer on offense that we get, a little bit of wiggle. Don't let that fool you. And again, broken tackles, 19, most in the Big 12 in 2022. 6'4", 220 wide receiver Quentin Johnston is now a Los Angeles Charger. Jake, how are we feeling?
I think there was a little bit indifference among Chargers fans when the selection was taken. And it's not, and I think we have to put this in a good perspective here. It's not so much that Quentin Johnston was the selection. It's who was still on the board when the Chargers made the selection for Quentin Johnston. Because I don't think anybody expected, especially recently and since his combine, that a player like Nolan Smith was going to drop to 21. I have been a champion of Nolan Smith and had put that as something of my dream scenario, that if he was to fall that far, that the Chargers should have sprinted that card up to the podium to select him. But the Chargers decided to go in a different direction. And not that this is a bad choice, because when you look at this wide receiver class, and we have discussed this at length, this is not your typical wide receiver class of yesteryears, of where we've had top premium talent that ends up being selected in the top 10. Not nearly the class that has come out from the draft in the last 3 years. And in a sea of smaller, prototypical slot receivers, Quentin Johnston was one of the exceptions of the bigger bodied wide receivers that Tom Telesco historically has coveted. So, and as Dan mentioned just a second ago, the yak production is a true difference maker. Yes, is Quentin Johnston not the fastest guy compared to some of the other receivers in this class? Absolutely. But he doesn't have the testing.
Faster than most.
He's still fast for a guy at his size, but compared to the rest of the guys that we have been talking about as far as what this offense needs, as far as speed and explosion, testing numbers, that was not there. But let's not forget, you rewind the timeline before the combine. Quentin Johnston was in the discussion as wide receiver one in this.
He was wide receiver one.
So you have to take that with the grain of salt that it is. And then obviously through the testing processes, and then of course the opinions on this wide receiver class as far as the top end value that kind of just brought everybody back down to earth and gave them a little bit more of perspective to say what this wide receiver class is in general.
And specifically, Jake, testing numbers, I think we mean specifically the 40 time, because other testing numbers were great.
Well, and even outside of that, whether it's the 40 times that you want to look at or the drop percentages that you want to look at from college, it's not something that A, can't be fixed, and B, can't be utilized in this offense. Because again, you're talking about what are the few traits that Quentin Johnston has over other wide receivers in this class. It's the yak production, and it's definitely the size. And he checks off both of the boxes. Yes, exactly. So you take those things as far as what was there on the board. And again, I personally thought if it wasn't going to be Nolan Smith, that the Chargers were going to execute a trade back. Tom Telesco said he was on the phone. Well, wasn't able to materialize a trade back. I've heard that for the last 10 years. Don't even get me started on that standpoint. But it is interesting to think that was literally the run of wide receivers, because you had Jackson Smith and Jigba go to the Seattle Seahawks at 20. Then it was the Chargers pick of Quentin Johnston. Zay Flowers ended up going to Baltimore, and then Jordan Addison went to Minnesota. Literally 4 consecutive wide receivers went in that span. So even if the Chargers were able to execute a trade back and they were still hoping to target a receiver in the first round, there is a high probability that they may have not gotten any one of those players. So as far as Quentin Johnston goes, now the selection of the Chargers, I don't think that people who were indifferent about the pick were necessarily upset that it was Quentin Johnston. It was more of, you look at the other players that the Chargers had kind of been highlighting as the draft got closer and closer.
People were talking about, yeah.
Zay Flowers' stock was just rocketing up the boards, and you thought that he was going to be the first wide receiver taken. Some people were talking about him as early as Green Bay or New England or anything like that, and that didn't end up materializing. So with everything that we had kind of thought was going to be the type of receiver that the Chargers would covet if they were going to pick one as in the first round, Quentin Johnston kind of got lost in the shuffle of things. And I think now you add another big body dynamic wide receiver who's going to bring a lot of downfield production. Listen up here. that should be the term that should be ringing in other people's ears right now. Downfield production, and you can actually utilize him in a number of different spots, not just outside, but you can utilize him inside as well, something that Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco highlighted when they were talking about making the selection for Quentin Johnston yesterday. That should make people excited, and it should make the people excited about how Kellen Moore is going to utilize him in this offense.
A couple things. Jazzed. I am stoked to see Quentin Johnston as a Charger. I agree with you. I think there's a little bit of a shock value in with the guys remaining on the board. Chargers fans were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe blank was still there. You lose sight of the guys they don't focus on because a lot of people didn't even think Quentin Johnston would be available, or they thought there were other guys that they would rather have at the position given what was available. I'm going to push back on a couple things for Chargers fans. Drop rate. Folks are pissed off that, he has a high drop rate. You know who has a higher drop rate, Jake? Zay Flowers. And folks wanted him. Talk about speed. Zay Flowers is faster. What, 0.34 faster? Sorry, 0.034 faster in a 40 time. Go watch game film. He's running 21 miles an hour plus. He's breaking away from corners who would run a 4.2. He is plenty fast. Like, plenty fast. So, 40 times are one thing. GPS, game film, different story. Chargers got a dude that, again, we talked about this for weeks. Chargers need a closer on offense. Playmaker on offense. Explosiveness on offense. Check, check, check. Quentin Johnston give you all three of those. Oh, and by the way, roster cap relief in spades. Quentin Johnston arguably could have saved $20-something million for this Chargers team in 2024, depending on how this thing plays out. So, Chargers fans got a good one. Chargers fans were in their feelings a bit, as we all were, myself included. But once you take a couple minutes, perspective, go do some research, check out what he actually does, comparison. The Chargers had two glaring needs in this draft. They had to go out and solve for. One, offensive speed and explosiveness. Two, depth on defense. The first one, they've checked. Second one, I can see them going into that, tapping in today. That said, when we did our wide receiver breakdown of our best fits for the Chargers, we talked about Quentin Johnston. And one of the questions that you had asked me was, if the Chargers go Quentin Johnston, do you think they are done at wide receiver? 100% no. I do not think they are done at wide receiver. Tom Telesco even talked about it yesterday when he was asked about if he, meaning Quentin Johnston, can do special teams. And they don't envision him that. Chargers don't have a returner right now. I would be shocked if they do not double dip at wide receiver, which we'll get into. Some of the guys that we're excited to see. Plenty of options. So for the folks who are even bitching about him not being a fast, quote unquote, guy, all of the fast guys are still there. Literally all of them. What fast guy was taken other than Zay Flowers? And Zay Flowers isn't going to be solving for your kick return, punt return, because there's no way in hell they're going to have him returning kicks. So you still got to go do a second receiver.
Yeah, I think some of the things that you highlight there, Dan, you bring up the drop rate. That's nothing that cannot be fixed at the next level. Okay, let's talk about that. I know that you can't teach speed, and I know that that can prick a lot of people's ears up when the Chargers have not had that speed element in such an amount of time. But you can't use the old Oakland Raiders perspective on how they judged wide receivers, because we've seen if speed is the only highlight that you can, that doesn't necessarily always translate to the best NFL player. Not to saying that players like Zay Flowers are not going to be productive at the next level, but you can't just pigeonhole yourself into that. The next one is from a standpoint of, okay, people would also bring up his route running. That's something that can definitely be improved at the next level, especially when you have Keenan Allen on this roster. I mean, hell, I remember when everybody was watching DK Metcalf's short shuttle and his biggest criticism of him not being able to run routes. I don't think that that's necessarily affected him at the next level either. These guys can always get better if they put the time into it. So there is nothing about the issues with Quentin Johnston that thinks that they cannot be corrected at the next level. You want to still feel that way? Fine. But there's nothing there that tells me that those are not issues that cannot be corrected with him at the next level. And especially if this coaching staff is going to bring him up and to be in a wide receiver room with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, I think he could definitely learn a lot of things from them moving forward.
There are many ways to kind of solve this puzzle that the Chargers have in this NFL draft. This is one of them. Would it have been the one that I would have gone for initially? From a pure roster construction? Arguably, no. I think they could go wide receiver later. But they went for the guy who I think has the highest ceiling of any wide receiver in this draft class. And if he can turn into what the highest ceiling is, they got themselves a game changer. And look, this team is looking for explosiveness and is looking for home run picks. And this seems to me like the possibility of having a more of a home run pick than any other guy that could have taken wide receiver in this entire class. So Quentin Johnston is that dude. You're going to see Justin Herbert torching folks with Quentin Johnston now for at least 4 years. Deep field, speed, agility, yak, missed tackles, all of which are coming to this Los Angeles Chargers team with Kellen Moore calling the plays, by the way. So
people love to bring up the highlights of Justin Herbert's rookie year when he's throwing it downfield to Jalen Guyton. You may get a resurgence of that now that you have Quentin Johnston on this.
Max Duggan's chucking like every other throw, it seems, 45 yards downfield at TCU. People who think he's not a downfield threat are blind. Like, this is a good pick. This is a good pick. Now, getting into kind of how it affects day 2 and day 3, I think that's where this is going to get a little interesting, which I'm excited to kind of get your take here, Jake. So, overall, I think people were going into this thinking, all right, Chargers are going to go wide at some point. Chargers are going to go wide receiver. They're going to go tight end. They're going to go DB. They might go running back if a guy falls. And then realistically after that, it's probably, obviously, edge. Those are probably the 4 spots. How does wide receiver picked in round 1 alter how you see this draft shaping out in day 2?
I think it almost pigeonholes yourself to you having to select an edge with your second round pick. If I was to prioritize them, because we've talked about the 3 biggest needs for the Chargers heading into this draft was wide receiver, edge, and tight end. Mm-hmm. This is a deep tight end class. I think depending on how it falls, I still believe that the run on tight ends is definitely going to take place early today. There's no doubt about that. But I still think that finding an edge with your second round pick is a huge priority.
And the reason for that, you talked, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry. The reason for that, you've talked about there's a very steep drop off at the edge position. And whether that is round 2 or round 3, it's somewhere in between.
Right.
And you do not want to be caught needing edge production, needing edge depth, and being after that run goes.
Correct.
Because those guys are not going to be taken over for guys you might already have on the roster.
Yes, exactly. And I've been a huge advocate saying that I still felt that edge was my number 1 priority heading into this draft. I still felt that that's what they should have targeted at 21 or execute a trade back to get more draft capital to give yourself a little bit more of position flexibility and what you could possibly do. It still is baffling to me for the fact that the Nolan Smith was available for the Chargers at 21, let alone that he fell to the Eagles at 30. I still cannot get over the fact of that he was still available at that spot.
Wild stuff going on.
As far as the priorities goes, I definitely still think it's edge at 54, and then you target the tight end class at with your next pick at 85 in the 3rd round. It would not shock me if the Chargers decide to flip-flop that priority. If the Chargers were able to come out of this draft with Quentin Johnston and let's say a Luke Musgrave, a Sam Laporta, a Tyler Croft, that's pretty damn good for what you're looking at as far as the Chargers offense goes and getting Justin Herbert surrounded by more weapons. If it were me though, and I'll just target one specifically that just comes to my head, again, one of my guys that I have highlighted as far as best fits for the edge position. The Chargers were able to come out of this in round 2 at 54 with BJ Ojolari coming off the board.
Yes.
Chargers fans should be elated with their first 2 picks.
If they could come back with, I don't care how you do it, if they come back with Quentin Johnston to BJ Ojolari, like people were talking BJ Ojolari as a possible first round pick. That would be sick. So the one position I think is kind of a wild card here is the DB position. Some of those guys fell. So let's get into it. So Jake, why don't we talk about some of our guys at the positions that we think they're going to go. So we've got, let's start with the edge position. Talked about BJ Ojolari. A couple other names that I had, as kind of like my best fits that I see. Notre Dame, Isaiah Foskey on our list of best fits. Derek Hall at Auburn, love him. Zach Harrison as well, like him. Any one of those four, Chargers get one of those guys doing backflips. That's a day 2 value pick that makes your defense better, especially at a position of drastic need currently now and in the future. Because those guys have a potential to be starters day 1.
Agreed. I actually even think if you were to target Tuli Tuipulotu in round 2, I think it would make a ton of sense just from the standpoint that could he step in as your edge 3? Yes, but he has so much positional versatility. And we've talked about it, how much the Chargers need that along the interior of the defensive line. That position group has kind of been put on the back burner as far as priorities goes. But you get a guy like that who can be that type of versatile, inside, outside guy that Brandon Staley would probably covet, much in the Morgan Fox type of role, if you will, and bring a scheme versatility like that. I think that would be a great fit if he was still on the board personally. And Dan, you mentioned the DB factor. I know it may seem that if the Chargers were to select a DB here in the second, day 2, whatever round it is, second or third, it may not make the most sense given still what the remaining needs are. But
they're not paying attention if you think that. You're not paying attention.
You have to remember who the Chargers coach is and how much he covets defensive backs in this.
Who the coaches are.
That's true. The coaches, because now your basically entire defensive coaching staff is made up of guys who made their living in the secondary. So you cannot, please do not be surprised if the Chargers end up selecting a secondary player today and do it early as pick 54.
Yes. So DBs to look for, Jake. This is including safeties as well. And I'm only including one safety in this one who's kind of a tweener. Obviously, Brian Branch, you and I have talked about him out of Alabama. The kid's a stud. Would be like Christmas morning for
Branch. If Brian Branch falls all the way to 54, I'm not sure what universe.
No,
I'm living.
That's like an Asante Samuel Jr. thing where it just makes too much sense. It makes too much sense for this defense. Who are some of the guys? Cam Smith. Love Cam Smith. Kelly Ringo. Really like him. Julius Brents, I think, is a name to look out for, as well as DJ Turner out of Michigan. Folks are seeing a lot of highlights of DJ Turner getting roasted against a one Quentin Johnston. But again, this guy has like track speed, 4.26, is definitely a day 2 guy. Any other DBs, safeties, or corners that you think would be home run picks for them or guys you'd like to see possibly picked?
I mean, for context, Athletics' Dane Brugler put up his mock draft for rounds 2 and 3 earlier today, and he did have the Chargers going Cam Smith out of South Carolina with their second round pick. So keep that in mind. If we're talking just in general, whether it's second round or third round, again, you brought up the safety aspect with Brian Branch. I will say it again for one of my favorites in this draft. I think Sidney Brown can be another chess piece like that if the Chargers were to go that route. Again, another guy with versatility. He is just a gamer in the secondary. You can play him at multiple positions. And I think just depending on what takes place, with John Johnston, if the Chargers are able to pursue him and sign him after the draft, we'll see. Obviously, time will tell on that. If Bryce Callahan ends up coming back, we don't know if they are going to end up trusting Jasir Taylor to come into that slot position and take it over. But I think a player like Sidney Brown, you put a chess piece like him next to a chess piece that you already have in Derwin James, I think that would make for a lot of fun in that secondary.
Yes, and I forgot, Jake. Somehow, Joey Porter Jr. is still available. He's
Not
in that
for long, he ain't.
He's in that same realm.
He could be the first guy off the board today.
Yep. Brian
Steelers
Branch
have the first pick. That makes so much sense.
If Joey Porter or Brian Branch or either one of them in some universe are available at 54. Again, we're talking about a draft where Michael Mayer, arguably tight end one, didn't even get picked. It's like crazier things have happened. We saw a linebacker get picked in the top 20. We saw 2 running backs go in the top 13. Like, what? So people want to dismiss all these possibilities. Like, we've seen crazy shit happen already in one day. Next position. We could go tight end, we can go receiver. Which one do you like?
I really like the fact that you highlighted the fact that Tom Telesco had mentioned that Quentin Johnston does not necessarily solve the returner need, which goes back to a discussion that we had after DeAndre Carter was signed by the Raiders to say, could the Chargers possibly double dip at wide receiver? And then Jalen Guyton ended up finding out that he was re-signed. So didn't necessarily take the priority of wide receiver away, but you thought, okay, maybe they won't end up double dipping at the position now. I would be elated if they ended up double dipping at the position. Really. And if you were looking for a guy who's going to step in as your, especially at this point, wide receiver 4/5, but you need that returner ability, this is something that can either be found in day. If we're putting priorities on it, I would say, okay, that conversation probably starts in round 3 and beyond. So we may have to wait until tomorrow.
Unless someone falls in round 2.
I know who you're just waiting to talk about. And that
there's
is
2 guys, but yeah.
There's your boy, obviously. But I like the fact that the possibility sounds like it's still going to be there. And Tom Telesco has double dipped at the wide receiver position previously with Joe Reed and KJ Hill. Not necessarily the best selections, but just the fact that he has done that should make you feel familiar with the situation and possibly get you prepared for it. Dan, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about one possibility of a guy that could be there, so go ahead.
Pray for me, Chargers fans. This is the day we've been waiting for. Tank Dell could be in Los Angeles Chargers today. Got a 1 in 32 chance of that happening. Look, Jake, the good part about this wide receiver class, and I'm glad that we did our best fits early on. Jake, 9 out of the top 10 best fits for us for the Los Angeles Chargers are still on the board. 9 out of the top 10. And a part of that, I will say, disclaimer, we didn't necessarily think that Quentin Johnston would be on the board, so it probably would be 8. But 9 out of the top 10 are still available. Could the Chargers go 2 receivers in the first 3 rounds? Like, that'd be bold. I love it. That would be bold. And if they can get a guy like Tank Dell, or like Marvin Mims, or like Trey Palmer, or like, hell, there's some Jaden Reed could be kind of a late day 2 guy that they could go after. Trey Scott, please. These are guys that I think you and I both probably, from an archetype perspective, probably want most in this offense. If they could somehow pair Quentin Johnston with any of those guys, like Chargers add Quentin Johnston and let's say Tank Dell, let's say Marvin Mims, Trey Tucker, Trey Palmer, whatever, any one of them, that offense, along with Kellen Moore, is completely transformed. Now, they can go other directions for speed, like Devin A-Chain is still available. Different direction, running back. There are other options there. But all of those guys we talked about can also fix your special team need. And you're not going to have your special teams guy also wide receiver 1-2. Just doesn't happen. So, folks who's like, oh, Zay Flowers to do that. He wasn't going to do it. He wasn't. Any other receivers that you think are in play here for day 2?
No, I mean, that's a good, coverage of any possibilities if the Chargers choose to double dip for.
I forgot your guy.
My guy.
The feet.
Oh, the educated feet, Josh Downs. I mean, look, them 6 selecting Quentin Johnston in round 1 probably negates any possibility of Josh Downs coming to the Chargers as well. But no, Dan, I would probably say the more likely priority for them today outside of the edge is going to be the tight end position. There's 3 tight ends I'm looking for. One is Luke Musgrave. I'm very interested to see where people are going to value him because has all the athletic traits that you would want, pass catching, blocking, he's there, but he's coming off an injury because he only played in 2 games last year. So where are teams going to covet his value? I think maybe that was those were some of the reasons why maybe people saw that Nolan Smith dropping as much as he did. So I'm interested to see, are people going to pursue him? If he still happens to be on the board at 54, I doubt it, but I thought that would be a home run for the Chargers and a lot of luck behind it if he's still on the board. The other one is Tucker Kraft. I love what I see from Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State. I think that would be as far as tight ends goes, I've been big on him and Tyler Kroft as far as the tight end class in this draft. And I would be totally elated with that if he ended up being the selection for the Chargers if they were to pursue him with their second round pick. And the other one is Sam Laporta from Iowa. I just think the fit and the type of skill set that you have kind of been lacking in this tight end room. He fits that bill perfectly. So, but the run on tight ends is going to go early today. I can feel it. So any one of those three guys, I would be completely happy with if the Chargers ended up pursuing tight ends with their second round pick today.
The good news with how the draft fell yesterday is a lot of the guys in the positions that the Chargers still need are available, and they fell. So like edge, we saw some edge go, but we probably didn't see as many as we thought we would see compared to like offensive tackle. Like saw a ton of those guys go. Corner, we saw some corners go, but we saw some corners go that we didn't think were gonna go. Like,
I mean, six edge players went yesterday. Wild.
Forbes, Emmanuel Forbes was rich.
Forbes would have. I mean, again, I think
half his picks were just given to him.
Forbes, first of all,
and he's 160.
I love Emmanuel Forbes, and if he would have come into this draft 20 pounds heavier, we would be talking about him going in the top 10. He is that type of a special player. But yes, that was definitely a surprise.
Yes,
considering the way that the corners kind of fell, specifically one Christian Gonzalez falling all the way to New England, which was wild. And that was just great value for them to pick him up. But then you have the Jamar Gibbs selection, the Jack Campbell selection. You know, there were very much, as one GM had said yesterday, is the most unpredictable draft that they could predict. And yesterday lived up to that bill with some of the moves that took place yesterday. So to your point though, Dan, with some of those surprises and selections that certain teams made, you still have a lot of talent to start off day two. I don't think that talent that's still remaining is going to last long, but what it does is it still ends up pushing other players down to the Chargers to possibly give them hope that their guy will be there when they make their second selection today at 54.
While I'm surprised that Michael Mayer didn't get picked in round one, I'm not surprised that the tight end position slipped, only because I could see so many GMs thinking, this class is so deep. Why spend it rich when I can just do it in round 2 or 3 and get a guy that's marginally less effective? So, like, if a Darnell Washington falls to 54, like the thing is, a lot of these things are kind of unlikely, but we can go through a scenario. I'm talking like 10, 12 people that I'm saying, oh my gosh, if they fall to 54, like one of them's going to do it. I promise you. And so just got to be patient. I'm curious to see if the Chargers do make some moves today. Likely, no, but more likely than previous years, probably, I guess. Darnell Washington would be my pick if I had a choice at the tight end position. I don't know. Any other players that are just kind of like, not necessarily blue chip, but blue chip for value that you can see, maybe not at those positions, but like, holy hell, if they're there, like you got to get them.
No, I think secondary edge and tight end just make the most sense as far as the positions to pursue today. I can't really see them targeting anything else as far as the value goes and how the board should fall. Those would seem like the three highest positions where the value should make the most sense at that spot.
Sidney Brown, is that too rich?
No, I mean, Sidney Brown and Brian Branch are, I think Sidney Brown to me should be a second round pick. I would be shocked, if he got out of the second round personally, with just the amount of versatility that he brings to the game. I guess I'll still be waiting until 2024 for whatever GM it is of this team to execute a trade back. I wouldn't expect a trade back today.
There's still 2 days left. There's still 2 days.
Yo, if the Chargers couldn't do it yesterday, I don't have much confidence that they're going to end up pulling it off today. But we'll see. I would just like them to have a little bit more capital, some flexibility to where you can address a number of different positions to get yourself more swings at the plate with a number of different players.
The good news. Chargers have one more player on their roster, and he's an offensive game wrecker, offensive playmaker, explosive wide receiver, Quentin Johnston, the newest Los Angeles Charger picked by Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley, captain of his team, and just oozes confidence and leadership. Great pick. Chargers got their guy on offense now. We'll see what happens with day 2. Pump for day 2. This is where I think teams make or break their draft. This is where value is to be had. Can't wait, man. I'm going to be on pins and needles all afternoon.
Hook up the heart monitors when Tom Telesco is on the clock in the 3rd round.
And have
the dreaded 3rd round comes today. So We'll see how we're doing after today.
I'm cool if they trade up and get rid of the 3rd round pick. Like, just don't even let it be an option. I know you don't want it, but I'd rather have it traded up for a better chance. Honestly, like, I'm kidding. I'm sort of kidding. But, like, it wouldn't be the worst thing if, like, you know what? Fine. He sucks at 3rd round picks, so I'm just not going to do it. That's fine. I'm cool with it. Jake, round 2. Here we go. How you feeling? Are you nervous right now? Are you, like, excited? Like, what's your mentality right now at this moment, 5 hours prior?
I'm excited about it because I think for where the Chargers want to pursue, there is a lot of options both at the tight end and the edge position as far as players that are still there. Now, if we're at pick 48, and depending on what type of run has been taken on edge and tight end today, then I'll probably start getting a little bit nervous, just depending on what
the
it
Brown
is.
Stuff for sure.
And then I'll probably be saying to myself, damn it, Tom, you should have traded back to give yourself more swings, and I probably could have felt a lot better about it, but we'll see. We have seen luck fall to the Chargers before, as recently as 2 years ago when they got Rashawn Slater and Asante Samuel Jr., who I said multiple times that was an impossibility and that was a complete pipe dream, and son of a bitch, it ended up happening.
Chargers had their sights on offensive explosion for months, came to fruition, got their guy in round 1. We'll see what happens on round 2. We'll be here to talk about it. Guys, gals, thank you so much for tuning in to Chargers Unleashed. Congratulations to fans who are excited. Be patient to those who are a little pessimistic. It's okay. We get it. But I do implore folks, please go do some research. Go check him out. Go see what he's like before you come up with your final conclusion of how you feel. Because, again, perspective and knowledge is power. Jake can be found at Jake D. Hefner. Myself can be found at Dan W. Sports. Jake, once again, thank you so much for yesterday, man. So much fun. Appreciate you and the whole group. That was a blast. The Hefner residents did not disappoint, my friend. We will talk to you guys next time on Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another round of Boardroom or Miro Board. Today we talk retrospectives with Agile coach Maria. Let's go. First question. You've spent 2 hours in a team retro, but the only input you've heard is Dave's. Boardroom or Miro Board?
Boardroom. In Miro, Dave can't hog the space because everyone can add thoughts anonymously, online at the same time.
Correct. Next. You need the team to act on feedback fast, so you turn all those retro notes into Jira tasks instantly.
Miro all the way. And I can assign those tasks to teammates.
You're nailing this. Now, you see hundreds of sticky notes from the retro. A real mess. But you organize them into 5 themes in just seconds.
Miro, I basically get back an entire hour when I use its AI tools for clustering.
And she's done it.
Join over 60 million people running actually enjoyable and actionable retros in Miro. Get your first 3 boards free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.